Alright, so you've been warned. This video is 20 minutes long, but I couldn't really find anything to cut out of it, so you might just want to listen for a couple little tips and tricks. Here we go.
Alright folks, today we're going to be doing an unboxing on this Harbor Freight 212cc 3-inch trash water pump. Now, it's not called a trash pump because it's from Harbor Freight. It's called a trash pump because it should be able to pass up to 1-inch diameter solids, so it can pump more than just water. A non-trash pump should be called a clear water pump, meaning it can pump only water and won't plug up. Now I'm just going to be honest with you right up front. I've bought like 8 of these things now. Okay, so I'm not new to this game. Check, make sure I'm in the frame here. I'm not new to this. I know what to expect, and that's why I wanted to make this video actually, to show you guys and tell you guys what I have found with these pumps. More than anything, I found that Harbor Freight will just continue to replace them. If you have the warranty, they'll just give you another one, and somebody's gonna ask, several of my friends already have, why in the hell do you keep buying them? And at this point, the only reason I'm going back is because they're doing their 90-day free replacement, so I'm not buying them. I'm just trying to get a pump that will last and work, you know, without having to go drop another $500 for something somewhere else, if that makes any sense. So Harbor Freight, they have a policy on pumps and sprayers now that because you've run chemical through it, they don't want it back in the store. They won't take it back in the store, so you have to call and report it, claim your warranty, tell them why, obviously, and they send you a gift card to go buy a new pump, tell you to keep the old one. That's cool. Now, of course, you waste time running around, going to the store, trying to find a store that has one. That's all annoying. But you're technically supposed to dispose of the old one. However, I've had the Harbor Freight people on the phone tell me, yeah, keep it for parts. Which I do. And unfortunately, it seems I always have something different break. So, something that for whatever reason I can't use those parts. So, once you get her all out of the box here and out of the bag, got your usual instruction manual. That's for beginners. Little silica bag, keep it fresh. We've got a label in here that says, do not return to the store. Your bag of goodies to send with it. You've got a hose adapter, male barb to male thread, and that's for your suction can. They always give you the suction can, and you'll see it has 1-inch holes in it. That's a way of kind of guaranteeing that if you use their suction can, you won't suck up anything too big. And they give you a spark plug kit, wrench kit. I've got, because I bought so many of these pumps, I've got like half a dozen of these things laying around the garage. Because I just have one permanently mounted to my hoses, and I always use the same one. Right off here they say, must be tested without water for no more than 10 seconds before installing. I'm not sure what that means, that's a new label. So over the course of probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 years that I've been buying these things, they've changed. At the root of it, it's always the same thing. It's always this same pump body, and it's always been a Predator 212cc engine, but they've changed a little bit on like how the flywheel attaches and stuff like that. And now they've stuck this stupid sticker on here. It's gonna piss me off, because I've got to get that off to put my hose thread adapters on. They do not send cam lock adapters. So what I like to run cam locks on my hoses, so I've bought a couple of 3-inch thread to cam lock, thread to male cam lock adapters that go on here, and then I've got female cam locks on my hoses. Little tag here on the pump: fill gas, add engine oil, prime water, and start it. So you do have to add oil, obviously. They have a label here on the tank you guys can't see probably, but it says gas only, 10% ethanol blend is okay, but no E85. Personally, I always run silver grade, at least silver grade gasoline in all my pumps. Now here's the kicker. I'm going to show you guys The number one failure that I have had on these pumps is from the factory, the bolts that mount the pump to the motor, to the engine, are not torqued up properly. I've had that failure happen on the last pump. That's why I just warrantied it for this one. I had it happen on 2 pumps over a year ago. Two pumps in the same batch. Both of them leaked. I took them both back to the store, got 2 new ones, and the 2 new ones didn't leak. Actually, the 2 new ones, I couldn't check the pumps because they changed the impeller design. That's something, if you go back in my videos, you'll find that. I was making a video much like this, and I was going to show you guys how to tighten the bolts, and then I couldn't get to them because they somehow pressed the impeller on instead of being the standard nut in the middle of it. So yeah, I'm going to show this to you guys, and for the first time that I've ever done this, I'm going to use some blue Loctite on those bolts. Because, like I said, I'm not trying to take advantage of Harbor Freight here. I'm really not. I just want a pump that will last. I like these pumps. They're affordable. The motors on them are pretty solid, from what I've seen. It's just those stupid bolts wiggling loose in the pump itself. Let me think on some of the other issues that I've had with some of the old ones. One of them was my fault. I had water down here in the cooling fans because it got rained on, and then we had a freeze a year ago, and that ice froze right down between those fans, and it actually stretched the head just enough that it made my head gasket start leaking. And the pump would actually still run, but it had poor compression, so it would start to foul off the plug, and it was questionable whether or not it would start or not. So let me see if we're still rolling here if I'm talking to myself. Yes, absolutely. Okay, so now we're going to get inside this thing. So I took out these big T-bolts. This whole housing just comes right off. In my case, it wants to pull this massive, this thing is heavy, this big cast iron piece. It may or may not come out with the housing, but it did here. And then you've got your impeller right here in the middle. Again, I've worked on this enough to know it is a 10 millimeter. And I use my impact to run that bolt off, because or else it's hard to try to wedge something in there to hold that in place to take that bolt loose. Just verify. Yep. We'll zip that off there. And again, somebody's going to ask, you know, why would you buy a pump that you have to put this much work into right out the box? Valid question. Again, I just keep rebuying it at this point because I want to get my money back. I want to get a pump that lasts. And if they're going to keep giving them to me for free to try to make it right, I'm okay with that. Man, this sucker's tight from the factory. My key for the drive shaft is inside there. This little housing will normally pop out. I might have to tinker with that to make it all go together. So it's these 4 bolts. See if you guys can see that. Yeah, these 4 bolts right here in the middle. Those are what will come loose and leak on you. Let me just see, I'm just curious. They're also a 10 millimeter. I'm curious if I put a wrench on it, how loose they might feel. Because they usually will hold up for a little while. That one's okay. That one's okay. That one's okay. Yeah, they feel okay right now, but I'm not gonna take any chances. So we'll just run them out. Because what happens, the bolts will start to come loose, and you'll start spraying water out between the pump and the motor. Which, okay, now you're leaking water, whatever. You're usually pumping on a site where there's water everywhere anyway. So that shouldn't really matter. But then it gets to where you have a hard time getting it to draw suction. Because when you're trying to prime it, it's wanting to pull air instead. So I'm using the blue Loctite. It's medium strength, so it should be able, if I do ever have to break this apart again, I should be able to. We're just going to throw a little bit on there. And I'm just going to do 1 bolt at a time to make sure that I don't accidentally pull the thing off and mess it up. And I'm going real light on the impact because they're weak bolts and it's aluminum block. So I've stripped a few in the past on accident with the impact, and this isn't a big heavy duty impact. Okay, so that was top right. Now we'll go top left and we'll work counterclockwise. So what happens, the bolts will start to shake loose, you'll start to leak, and then eventually they'll just fall completely out. And when they do, they fall down behind your impeller, and they can't usually get out from behind the impeller. So they get rolled around behind the impeller, and it will gum up the threads on them to where the bolts can't go back in. It'll mash the threads. I have had the bolts actually work their way out from behind the impeller and then jam it up. So the pump's running full tilt, just roaring, and kabang, you hear it lock up. And it's because that bolt jams up and stops it somehow. So that's probably not good on the motor when that happens. You know, you go from whatever RPMs that is to 0. Wouldn't surprise me if that might want to twist off your drive shaft, or not your drive shaft, your crank. Maybe slip a bearing or something in there. Don't want that to happen. So I hope hopefully this works and I don't have to keep doing this. You guys, if you go back and watch some of my older videos about working at the farm, you'll see I normally have 2 of these pumps running just to move water. Like I said, I think they're good little pumps, you know, for what you're getting. You know, plenty of people are going to argue they're not good if you have to do this much work, and that's true. But it's almost like, at this point for me, it's almost like having an old truck that you just can't get rid of. You just have to keep fixing it. And I'm determined that one of these times, one's going to fail, and I'm going to be able to fix it with the parts from the other one. Okay, so that's all I'm going to do on that. Got those bolts Loctited, and like I said, I wanted to show you all that because that has been the most consistent issue that I've had with them. I had the one that froze and stretched the head. I had one that just got, the carburetor got messed up somehow. And I actually tracked down a carburetor for a Predator 212 engine. Harbor Freight doesn't have them. But I tracked one down through a third-party website. It was like 20 bucks, and I replaced it, but I still couldn't get it right. So I don't know if something got out of balance in the motor on that one or what the deal was. But consistently, it's been these bolts that I've had to warranty them on. This is cast iron. This is like 20 pounds. This is why the pump is heavy. And they've changed this design around a couple times on me too. Of course, that doesn't go on yet. Now we've got to try to get our flywheel back on here, and I'm going to kind of have to, I'm going to have to jimmy it because I can't get, normally this washer on the front will come out, but I can't get it out this time. So I'm going to set my key in there, my shaft, whatever you call it, the key for the shaft, and I'm going to turn, I'm just pulling the rope to turn the drive shaft around. Until it's on the bottom so the key won't fall out as I slide it in here. Good. Get that in there. Make sure I don't have any missing parts. Bolt for that. I've never had the bolt come loose on the drive shaft. I think it's it spins the opposite direction. This is not a reverse thread. Sometimes you get like a lawnmower or something, and that bolt in the drive shaft will be reverse threaded. This one's not. This one is forward threaded, or normal threaded, whatever you want to call it. Okay, this sets back in. There's a little tab up here, and there's this hole right here. That has to hang on that hole. Otherwise, there's nothing that really holds this thing in place, which is kind of weird to me. I guess that's why it's cast iron. It's weird to me that nothing really, it's just a straight metal to metal contact with that body. I have found, tip the pump up in the middle just to give you some, I guess, leverage. That's what you want to call it. Or else this cast iron piece is kind of heavy out here on the end. It wants to fall out. So you get it set in there and get it just balanced just right. Use whatever else you have to get it tipped up nice and high. Stay. Okay. This rubber backflow goes on there. That's your backflow to help make sure that you can draw suction. You've got an O-ring right here on the inside of this housing. Sometimes that'll fall off. You can't put it back in the groove. To put this back on, you've got to put it on here first and then set this whole thing on. Okay, I'm going to be careful with it. Just make sure we don't bump that outer part of the impeller, knock it funny. Get this lined up. Put these T-bolts back in. I have had the T-bolts strip out over time on a few of the old ones, but it was, the pump was sitting in the mud for a year, and then I went to take it apart for something, and the bottom T-bolts that had been exposed to the most corrosion just broke off. And I've run these pumps with I think as few as 3, maybe 4 of the T-bolts, and they still hold their vacuum. It still will prime. Again, it's just those pumps on the motor that mess with it. What did it say? No more than 10 seconds without water? That's fine. I'll get it set up with water here in a bit, and we'll get her test fired up. So yeah, otherwise, oh, there's one other thing I'll show you that has messed with me in the past. There's a low oil level sensor. And you don't want to do this up front because you'll void the warranty. But what I have done, I have one that the warranty had run out on anyway, so I couldn't take it back. And then it wouldn't start. And I took it to a little small engine shop, and he showed me they have this low oil sensor, and if it detects that the oil level's too low, it won't start the pump, which is smart. But the problem was it wasn't working because the oil level was fine. So get all these torqued down. Normally I use a big pair of channel lock pliers, but you can use a wrench like this. It's not ideal, but just put a little torque on them. I've never been able to break these things loose just by hand. In theory, I think you should be able to. Wear safety goggles. Use with clear fresh water. That's funny. It says here on the use label on the side, use with clear fresh water only, but it's marketed as a trash pump. Answer me that. Anyway, biggest thing, like I said, biggest thing is those bolts. Show you all this little sensor right here. This is that oil level sensor. So on that last pump that I had where that sensor went bad, you can just unplug it. If you're confident that you put the oil in it and the oil level's right, you can just unplug that sensor, and then it won't work. It's just a ground fault anyway. Where did my... Oh, I was looking for my funnel. My kids took it. Oil, SAE 30 or 1030. I don't remember exactly. I've got 1030. That's what I've always had, so I guess that's what it calls for. Kind of a pain to put oil in these things just because where the oil fill is at. It's the fill check, and it's down here on the side, and it's a real flat angle, so you want to have a long, skinny funnel, or I guess you could just tip the pump up on the side and pour it in like a redneck. And I say like a redneck because that's what I do. Sometimes. It takes about a half a quart, which is conveniently what I have here because this was a full quart and I used it to change the oil or something. So, I don't know what would happen if you put too much oil in it. I suppose it would just leak back out. So I'm actually going to put that back in real quick and just pull it a couple times just to let it splash that oil around inside the engine. Ain't got no paper towel. That's what old dirty work shirts are for. Check our oil level here. It's just got the little hash marks on it to tell you when it's full or not. Says she's full. And that matches up with what I put in. So we'll get it fired up. I'll run it. I'll run a few tanks through it. And then I'll check the oil again just to make sure. And actually what I've done in the past that I would like to do, after you run a few tanks, change your oil again. Just kind of it's a good break-in practice. So that's it for starting these things up as far as getting them set up. Again, you shouldn't have to take it apart like that and tighten those bolts. I agree. And you know what? That's up to you. If you want to go to Harbor Freight and buy one and not do that, and then have those bolts risk that they'll vibrate loose. Like I said, not every pump that I've owned has done it, but I've had that happen to several of them that I've owned. So I consider that a consistent problem. If you don't want to do that, I don't suppose you have to. And you can just take it back to Harbor Freight. Buy the warranty if you want. They offer a 90-day return. The ones that I've had those bolts vibrate loose on, if you're running this thing a lot, they're going to shake loose in the first 10 to 15 tanks of gas, which would be, it runs for about an hour per tank. So if you're running it all day on a job, those loose bolts are going to manifest themselves pretty quick. And I would recommend, you know, every 10 tanks or once a week or whatever, depending on how much you're running it, pop that thing open and check those bolts again. Even with the Loctite, I'm going to check them again. Because yeah, to me, there's no sense in abusing the system if you know better. You know, and I've learned better. Well, I say I've learned better. I haven't learned to stop buying the damn things. So, let's get it brought around here to the pond. Let's get some water in it, get it primed up, fire it up.